was walking from a train station. I had all of my luggage with me, and I was kind of walking down this little side alleyway, and something just told me to be really aware of my surroundings, because I was about to head down a path that was really separate from the rest of, you know, it was out of sight, basically. It was out of sight from the public. And yeah, something just told me to kind of be aware of my surroundings, and I realized that I was being followed. And yeah, I had this guy, sort of, I don't know, it was really strange. I could see him looking around, checking if there's anyone nearby. And yeah, I was like, well, I'm not going to go down this alleyway. I'm going to kind of backtrack and stay where there's houses and that sort of thing. And I rang a friend, and just said, I think I'm being followed. I just had this feeling that he was trying to mug me, or maybe, I don't know. I felt like he was after my stuff more than he was after me. And yeah, this guy, he slowed down as he got to me, and he walked down this side kind of alleyway, and then I could see him like looking over the fence at me. And then he circled back and came up kind of holding this purse, or it almost looked like a glasses case or something. And he said, oh, did you drop this? This is your purse. You've dropped it. To get your attention. Yeah. And meanwhile, my friend's on loudspeaker, and because I was relaying to my friend, like, I need you on Google Maps. This is where I am. Is there any way that I can get to my accommodation without having to go down this little side street? He's like, no. And so, yeah, this guy was, he came back and said, oh, it's full of jewelry. I think you dropped it down there. I was like, it's definitely not mine. He sort of lingered there and just was giving me the up and down and like looking at my stuff and, you know, whatever else. And then just slowly sort of walked away. Then I could see him looking over the fence at me again. And as soon as I saw his head disappear, I just made a run for it. And, you know, and I'm there with my, like, my suitcase, like holding it so that the wheels wouldn't make a noise as I was running away, because I didn't want him to be able to track where I was. And thankfully, these two guys had just come out of their house, and I said, I've just had this experience. Can I hang out with you for a couple, you know, just for a while? And they said, well, we're actually driving where you want to go. Do you want us to give you a lift? And so I kept my friend on the phone. So that was that. Made a police report, all of that. And then, maybe I think it was a day or two later, I'd booked into an Airbnb. And there was just something, again, like intuition told me there was something a little bit funny, because they'd sent me a message asking for a copy of my license, and that sparked something in me where I was like, I don't know, like I'm not sure about this. And then I was like, I think you're just being paranoid because of what happened the other day. So I sent, you know, and I was like, a lot of hotels ask for a photocopy of your license. So, you know, and so, sent a photo of my license, and then got to the train station from which I was going to catch an Uber to this accommodation. And I realized that the text that they'd sent me had a different address to what was online. And so I rang them. And I said, oh, I'm just clarifying, what's the address here? And the guy that answered the phone he seemed confused, you know, and I was like, well, it's this booking for this suburb. And he's like, yeah, hang on. And I was like, I just need you to give me the address. And he's like, hang on. And I'm like, do you not know your own accommodation address? And I could hear him typing. And so the whole time I was like, something's not right. But I just kept going, you're being paranoid because of what happened. So anyway, I catch this Uber, and I remember saying to the Uber, I said, can you please, I just have a funny feeling, can you please not drive away until I poke my head back out and wave? He said, yeah, that's fine. And so I entered the gate code, and I was like, okay, we're all good. And then, went into this, it was like an apartment complex kind of setup, and went into the apartment, and I walked in, and the first thing I saw was like a over full, like trashed, like garbage that, you know, obviously hadn't been cleaned out. I was like, that's bizarre. Kept walking in, went into the bedroom, and the bedding was not made up, you know, like it was all thrown around everywhere. And then I look, and there's a window smashed. And by this point I'm starting to like panic. And I go into the bathroom, and there's blood in the sink. And I just immediately went into freak out of like, am I being set up? Like these guys know I'm here. Am I about to get, you know, mobbed? Are they going to just come in a group of men, you know? And by this stage, I mean, it was something like 10 o'clock at night at this point. So I'm like, my options are stay here and risk, you know, that they know I'm here, stay in a dirty place, you know, or do I go back out with nowhere to go at 10 o'clock at night and, you know, a city where I don't really know anyone. So I made the decision to just like gather my stuff and just go out into the night. And thankfully I was able to find a Uber pretty quickly and get to a hotel that had one last room left. But yeah, it was that, just this 2-day block of just all of these like, I guess just baseline safety challenges.
Do you think that those two events were linked, the guy following you? Okay.
I don't think so, no.
What do you make of that? What do you make of those two things happening so close together but actually not having a relationship?
I think because I travel a lot and my vision for my life, and I travel solo a lot, and my vision for my life is that like I want to travel the world, you know, and part of that is I guess facing uncertainty and having to be like really malleable and probably facing some really like negative shit, you know, like Australia's largely a fairly safe place and there's a lot of places out there that are not so safe. And so I almost saw it as like, is this really what you want? You know, like you've built this whole vision of like you want to travel the world with your work, and some of that will require solo travel and, you know, being in foreign cities where you don't know anyone. And so like this may come hand in hand with that. So is it still something that you want to do? After that experience, because I was booked to go solo to New Zealand for 3 weeks, 2 weeks after getting back from that trip. And so, yeah, like I got home and was like, do I want to do this? Like, do I still have the courage to travel? You know, and it was really like I was questioning, is this what I want to do with my life? Like maybe I just want to be a homebody instead and do all my work online and, you know. And so, yeah, it was really like I feel like it was testing my not my grit, that's not the right word, but like I guess my commitment to this vision that I had. And the other thing was, you know, because so much of my work is around fear and our fight, flight, freeze responses and stress and how we deal with uncertainty. And, you know, more specifically with women and what women navigate in this world. So it was, I almost saw it as like, oh, here's an insight that you haven't got before into your work, into what women go through, you know, into, yeah, what it is to be a woman trying to create this vision in a largely, if you will, patriarchal world. So
uncertain world, yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned a few times in the story that you got a hit of intuition, and I want to understand what that looked like. Like you said that you got that hit of intuition, like, oh, he didn't want me, but he wanted my stuff. Describe that in more detail, what that intuition felt like, what it looked like.
Yeah. I mean, it's this interesting thing because, like, I do believe it was intuition. And then there was also, because I train Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and so part of that is, you know, we've sort of been trained in many ways to assess our surroundings and have this kind of awareness. So I don't know, it's this fine thread between like what was just logic and what was intuition. And to be honest, I still don't have an answer as to what was what. So, I mean, in the situation where I was being followed, part of it was that I was aware that where I'd been walking, there was houses on one side. And on the other side, there's kind of like a median strip with a fence that I wouldn't have physically been able to jump that opened up onto a main road, but it was hidden largely by trees. So I knew that up until then I'd been, you know, there were houses and that, so I could easily run and knock on someone's door, or, you know, there was public, you know, around. The next part of this, the walk was fence line. And so it was basically fence, path, and then fence. And so I was hidden. And so I think it was something in me that was like, oh, hang on. I just need to, because this is, you know, a 300-meter stretch where I'm on my own, you know. And I don't know, it was just something in me that was like, just check. And I actually did go, are you being paranoid? But it just kept nudging me, just check. And so as I looked around and I saw this guy, you know, further back, and I just happened to time turning to look at him as he was looking around. And I'm so grateful that I saw that, because I think that was the thing that made me go, oh, hang on, there's something sus happening here.
He's not just walking on the street.
Yeah, he's not just strolling along innocently, you know. And there was this moment, it was like a fork in the road moment where part of me was like, oh, you're just being paranoid. Just keep walking, you'll be fine. Like, he's far enough back. And then I'm like, better to be safe than sorry. And so, yeah, I did. I like doubled back and kind of went and just lingered by a doorway by a driveway. And rang my friend just to be on the safe side. And then, yeah, the other situation, when I came to the Airbnb it was like a quiet whisper. And it was telling me just hold off. Like, just don't just blindly do what they've asked you to do. They've asked for a photo of your ID, you know, just maybe wait and just think about it a little bit. And in that situation, I did write it off as paranoia because of what had happened.
Yeah.
So I knew that I was already quite hypervigilant, and in a way that I'd never experienced before, you know, like I was sitting at train stations and attracting all of these weird situations, like homeless men coming and sitting right next to me with their leg touching mine, talking to me, and feeling myself going, oh my God, he's going to stab me, you know, and having these stories pop up. So, it was a quiet whisper and almost like a just wait. Don't react yet. Just think this through. Give yourself some time to process.
Do you think that there's a difference between your intuition as a woman and your instinct?
Yes. I think that, and this is the thing. In both of those situations, the part of me that hesitated listening to my intuition was actually profiling. You know, like, and I was aware that kind of my story around these situations was based on generalizations from from past dynamics. Mm-hmm. So I think that like the intuition is almost, for me in those situations, it was quite quiet and just like, it almost felt like it was deeper, you know, like I can almost describe it as, it's going to sound really woo, but like a sparkly kind of like whisper deep in my sternum sort of thing.
Butterflies.
Not butterflies. It was just like a, hey, pay attention, you know? Whereas the fear element and the generalizations it felt louder and more urgent, you know? And I do think the two go hand in hand, but there is a difference. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know whether that answers your question.
Yeah. I think my running theory is that one of them is fear-driven. The instinct is fear-driven, and that's an important biological survival mechanism.
Yeah.
And intuition is more of an inspiration kind of feeling.
I would agree, because I think, in those cases, the intuition was, it felt less scared animal, you know, and because like the fear dynamic for me in those moments was very like I felt like a dog backed into a corner and it, you know, sort of tail between my legs, but like if you come too much closer, I'll bite, you know, if I have to, I will bite to get out of this situation. Whereas the what I would describe as intuition in those dynamics was more of a relaxed, quiet, like just pay attention.
Yeah, I want to talk about fear, but I also actually want to look at this situation through the lens of someone with martial arts training like yourself. What comes to mind for you in those situations in regards to your very specific self-defense skill set?
So in the dynamic with the guy following me, I actually look back now and I applaud myself, because I think of a younger version of me that would have probably, to be honest, not even paid attention to the nudge and would have just recklessly wandered, you know, down the path. Yeah. But I think the difference of being trained in martial arts is that I feel like it gives you space rather than just reacting. It almost gives you space to process a lot more information when it's coming at you quickly. And so I put it down to my martial arts training that I thought to ring a friend and to get him on loudspeaker. And he's also trained. He was actually the guy that got me into martial arts. And I picked him specifically for that reason. So I knew that he would handle it well and that he would, you know, instead of panicking and being like, oh my God, how do I protect this friend who's in a completely different state of Australia? He would go into, well, what can I do from this different state of Australia? And so, yeah, it felt like I was panicking and there was anxiety, but there was also a lot of room to be able to, okay, what are my options here? And then there was a moment when he approached me carrying this purse. Again, that feeling of spaciousness. I was almost coming up with a game plan. And so, you know, I knew that my brain was going, okay, if he closes the distance, he's going to be coming towards me. And so my best option is actually to use that momentum in my favor and kind of basically take him down the way that he's coming at me. I'm not going to try and push back because then it's going to kind of be two bulls butting heads.
Force against force.
Yeah. Whereas if he's coming at me, he's not going to expect me to go with it and use that. So I was kind of planning in my head, you know, basically to judo throw him essentially. And I knew because we were on concrete. So I'm like, well, that's going to hurt. And it's going to give me room to get out of there basically. The other thing that I was tracking was, okay, well, if he, because he was slowly walking towards me and just sort of gauging how close he could get. And so, you know, I was sort of going, okay, well, what are my options? If it ends up on the floor, I'm going to be on the bottom. You know, I've got arm bars, I've got chokes, I've got, you know, and then because I had my suitcase on wheels, I had my laptop, and then I had another bag, like a handbag sort of. And so I was tracking, okay, what's going to get tangled? You know, I'll need to get these off of me so that I've got use of my hands. I also had some valuables. I had jewelry in my bag that I'd taken off earlier that morning because I'd been at the gym, so I'd been lifting weights. So I'd taken my rings off and stuff. And so, but they're family heirlooms, they're valuable. So I was going, okay, I don't really want to have to give that up. So how important is it to me that I keep hold of that, you know, rather than just getting out of there myself?
What'd you land on?
I think it was sort of a let's see. I ideally like my laptop and my handbag are the important things because that's my work. That's got my phone. It's got my, you know, my my bank cards, all of that. And it was also the bag that did have my rings in it. The suitcase, whatever, have it. And then, yeah, the other thing that I was tracking was whether he had a weapon. He did look like, I hate to generalize, but I just got this vibe that he wasn't entirely sober and potentially was carrying a weapon. So that was the other thing that I was considering. Like basically me, you know, judo throwing him or taking it to the ground is last resort. If I can keep him away, because, you know, it doesn't matter how good at martial arts you are, if someone's got a knife, then, yeah, you know, you're at a disadvantage. So, yeah, to answer your question is just having space to be able to process, have a game plan, map it out logically rather than just kind of
go with the flow.
Yeah, or, you know, to just like react rather than be on the front foot, you know?
Yeah. Assessing like, how can I use physics in my favor? Yeah. How can I? Yeah, it's interesting. It does. It sounds like that's how I would describe the practice of meditation.
Yeah.
If people were like, you know, what has your practice of meditation done for you? I would say, give me more space.
Yeah.
You make decisions.
Yeah.
To react.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about fear now. If fear is the natural instinct of the body when we're trying to protect ourselves and maybe it's not something that you can get above, how do you work with it in order to actually also have access to this spaciousness?
I think a lot of the work in that in martial arts and even my dynamic is like meditation. It's almost everything you've done before rather than in the moment. You know, in the moment, there's so much stimulus coming at you that to try and sort through it in the moment is like it's difficult, you know, and so it's a practice and you build the capacity over time. In my work, I chunk fear down into like an underactive response, which is your freeze response. And that's like shut down. Everything slows down. You know, you're not able to think clearly. Everything becomes heavy. It's kind of like you're foggy versus then there's fight or flight, which is everything sped up. You know, it's more of an anxious response. You're more prone to like a big adrenaline spike and then a dump. I was kind of tracking it for myself of like, okay, yeah, like I'm in more of an anxious response, and it was trying to calm that down. And so, you know, I look back on having the friend with me, you know, like on the phone, that was a resource to keep me anchored in that little bit of safety state, that little bit of ventral vagus state. And so the more anchored we are in our safety state, we can have that blend of fight or flight being active, or even freeze being active. But if we've still got just that one foot kind of in ventral vagus, in safety, it allows us more of that space.
It's not every day that we find ourselves in these situations where our survival is actually on the line. And then at the same time, so many of us are out there living in survival mode. But what surprised you about your fear response in the moment, in your recent experiences?
I think it was after. It was actually interesting because I remember processing the situation, but then there was also an observer side of me. There was like, just get the thing done. So especially with the accommodation situation, it was like, okay, step 1, get out. Step 2, like get a car, some sort of, vehicle. So, straight onto Uber. Step 3, okay, cool. Like now I'm with someone. I've got, again, that safety resource. So it was very kind of methodical. And then even when I had landed myself at safe accommodation, it was like, okay, cool, like bring the cops, have these conversations. And so I watched myself become quite methodical. But it was after, where kind of when all of the to-dos were done, like I was safe, the situation was over, like I was no longer sort of like fighting just to survive. In the quiet afterwards, the anxiety that came up. Like I remember being at a friend's place after and just being like, like, oh my God, there's all this anxious energy. Like, what do I do with it? And really, in a way that I've never felt before, experiencing this paranoia of like checking everyone, like, are they after me? Like, is this person after me? And there was even a moment where I was standing waiting. I was going to a friend's gym, and I'd arrived just before she had, and I was standing on the side of the road just waiting for her to arrive and unlock. And I saw a man walking towards me from down the street, and he was just out for a walk. But and things like that wouldn't normally rattle me. Yeah. But I just straight away went, oh my God, like, is he coming to get me? And I sort of started, okay, what are my options? Who's around? Like, where can I go? Where can I hide? And then as he sort of, because I've sort of ducked back kind of away from direct view from him into this little kind of like alcove on the street. And I've felt myself like hold my breath as he's walked past, and he's looked at me and we've made eye contact, and I've gone, oh God, internally, like he's coming for me. And he just went, hi, morning, and then like, me kind of just feeling this relief, and then this momentary tension as he's walked past of me needing to check to make sure that he's not turning around, and so that surprised me because I've never really been the person who, I think I inherently tend to like trust, like I see people as good before I see them as, someone that I need to watch out for. So to have that experience of like being mindful of where I sit in public or who's around me, and, like if they make eye contact with me, if they, just all of that is hypervigilance really shocked me quite a bit. Yeah, I've never experienced anything like it before.
Yeah, you get the opportunity to become a student to your own teachings again.
Yeah, like I really felt what it was like to be a prey animal.
Humbling.
Yeah.
Speaking of being humbled, let's talk about Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
What's it like being a woman in that sport?
There's a lot of duality. I think it depends on where you train. I mean, I've had the blessing of I've trained at all different gyms in all different countries. Yeah, I've had the experience of walking in and very much feeling like the prey animal, walking in feeling like, oh, I don't fit in here. I'm the only woman. These guys are big. They're, just in some cases, they're not welcoming. I feel almost like I'm, like, what are you doing here as a woman? And almost having to like earn my place. Like, oh, let me prove that I have a right to be here. And then having, like, there's been situations where, it's like, oh, like a woman, okay, like, and it's like, for lack of a better way of putting it, like, fresh meat, and that feeling of just like, oh, okay, like I go home and, like there's just all these messages flooding my inboxes that found me on Instagram and, interesting. Yeah. And then I've had really phenomenal experiences of going to gyms where, it's full of men who are husbands and girl dads and just feeling like, oh, like this is a safe space to be, and like they celebrate you and they're like, how can we help you? Like we want more women in this sport, like we've got daughters growing up and we want them to grow up with role models and, and then I think the other element of it is that as women, we process safety so differently to men. Like I don't think men have this same constant background narrative and hypervigilance about am I safe or am I not? Like I watch men and they just get in there and they train and they have a laugh with their buddies and then they leave. Whereas I think as a woman, you're going in and you're like assessing, okay, like are these guys who are going to hit on me? Are these guys who are going to, do they want me here? Am I messing up the boys club? Am I, if there's other women on the mats, it's like, are these sisters or are they competition? And just that, like assessing the size difference and the strength difference. And I think there's a real, just a constant hypervigilance. And I've had the conversation with men, like male training partners, where they're like, oh my God, you're processing all of that just to walk in the gym? Like, how do you learn anything? Because for them, it's just roll up, train, high five their buddies and leave. So yeah, it's, I love it. And it's also been such a big initiation. And I think that's part of the reason I do it because, it goes part and parcel with my work, of understanding what has a human feel safe and feel relaxed and be able to access creativity and logic and intuition and inspiration and all of those things versus being kind of trapped and braced in hypervigilance. And so it's really been probably my biggest teacher. Because I'm facing those dynamics on a daily basis.
Hi, sorry to interrupt this incredibly interesting conversation, but I do have something important to tell you. I have a Substack and I would love you to come on over and be a part of my community on there. My Substack is the place where I publish all the things that don't make it into the podcast. It's where I unpack my research process, how I meet my guests, what it's like when I meet them. If you're really interested in the conversations I have, being part of my Substack is going to give you this insider's insight into why I ask the things that I ask. It's kind of like a if you know sort of space. So if that sounds interesting to you, then drop on down to the show notes. There's a link there. Click on it. It's free and it also gives you access to me. So if you have questions for me, then that is the way that I would love to hear from you. Okay, that's all. Back to the conversation. You think guys walk into the dojo with a sense of whose bones am I going to break today, and women walking with which bone am I potentially going to get broken?
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah. I think it depends on the woman because it's funny because I think of when I first started martial arts, I was early 20s. I didn't have the same awareness, I suppose, of my mortality, and that like I would say I didn't have the same risk versus reward kind of, I didn't weigh it up in the same way I do now. So I think, at 20, it was just get in there and train like you're one of the boys and like, who cares if you break a bone and just like, and I think part of that, to be honest, was that I was much more driven to prove that I was allowed to be there. Whereas as I've gotten older and probably, my body doesn't recover from wear and tear as well. And I've probably become more connected with my feminine and less driven by needing to prove myself. Yes, certainly there's a lot more of the focus on, am I willing to get hurt? Does it matter that much to me? Whereas I do see other women who they just get in there and they remind me of this, 21-year-old version of me where it was just like, I'll break toes and still show up the next day and keep doing it. Whereas now I'm like, no, I'm injured. I'm going to go have a bath. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. How do you think femininity gets expressed among the women in the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu community?
There's a sisterhood. And I think we're seeing it. I mean, there's a lot going on in the Jiu-Jitsu world at the moment. There's kind of our own version of the Hollywood Me Too movement coming out in the jiu-jitsu world at the moment.
That's yeah.
Yeah. And I'm grateful that it's all coming to light because the conversation's being had. Whereas before it was kind of the thing that we knew was happening, but no one really spoke about. But I think there's what I'm seeing emerge is a real sisterhood where like the women talk, you know, and we warn each other. And we you know, there's these really cool moments with women on the mats where you walk in and like you may not even necessarily talk to them, but you have this moment of like, oh yeah, like there's another woman here. And, you know, and then you have these quiet moments in between your rounds, you know, when you've got your 60 seconds of rest where you might just kind of, you know, sit side by side and like, hey, like who's a good role here? Of like, oh, this guy, dodge him. This guy, you know, like here's who's safe, here's who's not, and here's why they're safe or not. And so, yeah, it's this sisterhood and kind of like there's a bonding through like the shared experience. You know, like there's some women that actually I'm very blessed. I have a black belt training partner at my home gym, and she came up through jiu-jitsu when women on the mats was unheard of. And so we often will just have these quiet little conversations of like, you know, like, and like I feel this admiration for her of like, how did you do it? Because I'm coming up through the ranks when it's still largely male dominated, but most of the time you've got at least one other woman on the mats with you. And women are a lot more welcome and accepted. But it's, yeah, this appreciation for the shared, like what we go through and like the toughness of like, oh, like you're gritty. Like if you're still here after years of training, like it's taken something for you to be here. Shared appreciation and just, yeah, there's a unspoken kind of, we've got each other. Even if you're not my person, we don't necessarily click. We're both walking the same path and navigating a lot of the same shit. So I think it's if push comes to shove, even if we're not best buds, like I've got you.
So I'm guessing that when you're actually grappling, things are happening really quickly. There's limbs flying everywhere, especially if you're doing it with a man, then they're, you know, the bigger than you, there's more body parts surrounding you, and that you have to make decisions pretty quickly in order to not lose the grapple or in order to not, you know, get hurt. So my understanding is that there would be an instinctual reaction there, is that you would have to just let your body do what it has done. And then in other scenarios in a fight, you're making a plan. In what context is it a good idea for you to be getting as much space as possible to make that plan? And in what context are you actually just needing to get in there and trust your body to react from instinct and training?
I think a lot of it is, again, the nervous system work. Like it's building, I call it like building capacity, because yeah, there's definitely an element of muscle memory. There's definitely an element of, you know, I've had moments, I remember specifically one I did, I entered the state championships and I got hay fever the week off. And so I couldn't breathe through my nose. And, you know, like if you know anything about breathing patterns and that sort of thing, like if you're breathing through your mouth, your body's already slightly braced. And so, you know, you're going to enter that fight or flight response a lot quicker. And so I remember this match, and it's the most tangible expression of fight or flight that I've ever experienced in jiu-jitsu personally, where, yeah, because I couldn't breathe through my nose, I was mouth breathing, and it felt like I was on the cusp of an asthma attack or a panic attack the entire match. And this is a 6-minute match. And so I could hear my coach yelling at me like, close your mouth, breathe through your nose. I'm like, I can't breathe. And I didn't remember anything of the match. And my friend said to me, I got video footage of that, I can send it to you. And I remember going, I didn't want to watch it because I don't remember what happened. And, you know, I actually left it for a good couple of weeks before I could bring myself to watch the match, because I was so in animal instinct that there was no thought going on. And when I did watch it back, I was like, that was actually a pretty good match. Like I did everything that I'd planned. And so it proved to me that at my worst, I'm not that bad. You know, like I could be in pure instinct and muscle memory kicked in. But what I did realize was that I didn't have a lot of capacity for my cardio being pushed. And so my brain left the building very quickly when I couldn't breathe. So it made me realize that my work, if I wanted to be able to still stay and slow things down to have a game plan, even when things are happening really quickly, I needed to be able to, build my capacity cardiovascularly, where I could train myself and pattern my system that even when I'm like choking on my own breath and my own saliva, that my brain's still like I'm still present. I still have that connection to ventral vagus. I still have that connection to safety state. So I think a lot of it is, I really do believe that, and this is going to sound a little woo, but like that, time's malleable. You know, like when you're in that animal instinct, things are happening too quick for you to actually grasp anything. But when you've got that connection to safety state, some of the things that I found myself thinking in the midst of like a competition, I'm like, how do they even have time to process that? You know, like I've had moments where one of my first ever competitions, I was mapping out in advance how I wanted it to go. And I was playing around with different archetypes to access for this match. And so I decided like, I want to be the lioness, but I want to be the playful lioness where I'm like, you know, when you see house cats and they play with their food, you know, they might catch like a bug or something and they'll like swat it around. Mm-hmm. That was the archetype that I was going for. I was like, I want to be a lioness, but I don't want to be a hungry lioness where I'm like starved and desperate for the hunt. I want it to be like that element of the house cat where it's like, I'm safe. I'm just playing with my food. Like this is fun for me. And so I was working on, and this is going to sound a little strange, but I was like, I'll know the moment that I've won the match because I'll actually see the moment where my opponent looks overwhelmed. And I experienced that, you know, in the midst of this like very fast moving jiu-jitsu match, there was this moment where I ended up on top and I looked down at my opponent and she just looked totally overwhelmed. And I was like, there it is. You know, and I tell that story and people are like, how could you sit there processing like this, you know, this archetype that you're tapping into and who you're being during this match? And
yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. And to, you know, have an awareness of her facial expressions and, you know, all these different things. I mean, to be honest, I go, yeah, I don't really know how I had time to think about that, but it was all there. And I do think that when we're connected to safety state, we have more space. Things kind of slow down, and not in like a laggy way, not in like a heavy, slow kind of frozen way, but in a very just present, I'm here, I see all of it, I can process all of it without it being overwhelming. So I think it's just training capacity. It's just training the, okay, I know how this goes. You know, ahead of that match, I was really training being okay with the pressure of having people watch, and it was my very first comp. So yeah, I really consciously built the capacity to stay with myself.
Have there been other moments in your life that have made you wonder about the nature of time and its flexibility?
Definitely. I've played around a lot with hypnotherapy. So pre-jiu-jitsu, I was involved in bodybuilding. And so I did a lot of hypnotherapy work for like visualizing the win, you know, and like maintaining discipline with eating plans and all of that sort of stuff. And so, yeah, I definitely remember some moments where, you know, I'd be put into these like hypnotic trances and what felt like a minute had gone by. When I would come to, I would look at the time and be like, oh my God, you mean I sat there with my eyes closed in silence, just allowing my subconscious mind to like reprogram itself for 30 minutes then? Hypnotherapy has probably been the key one where I've really just experienced some weird stuff with time, or like float tanks, you know, when you sort of your brain waves shift. Meditation, you know, where it's like you're here but you're not. And before you know it, you know, an hour and a half has passed and you're like, oh, thought I was, you know, 5 minutes. I thought 5 minutes had gone by. And then I've had moments where, you know, it's the opposite. It's like, as I've said, you know, like it's a fast moving match, but you can see all of it. You can process it and you know, you can almost like, you can it's like a chess match. You can watch your opponent and be like, oh, that hand's about to go there because they want this. So I'm just going to move my leg out of the way so they can't grab it, or, you know, and it's all almost Matrix-like. You're just seeing it before it happens almost.
The precognition thing feels interesting. That's like potentially something that comes online when you're in those scenarios where you're having to protect yourself.
Yeah.
And whether it's like, is it actual precognition? Like, are you actually jumping forward in time and able to see a snapshot of what's going to happen? Or are you, is your brain, because there's lots of theories that the brain is actually just a predicting machine. Yes, the brain is just predicting the next thing.
Yeah.
And perhaps not tapping into or receiving any sort of external frequency. You know, and nobody knows the answers to these things yet. All we can kind of go off is like, what have our experiences been? Do I feel like I have precognition, like I'm skipping forward or backward in time? Or is my brain just a pattern recognition machine?
Yeah, it's an interesting one to explore, because when I think of situations where, say, I've preempted something happening in jiu-jitsu, some of that is definitely like, oh, I know, like I can tell by the way this person moves that this is, you know, and because in jiu-jitsu there's different styles. So you develop kind of like a stylistic game, and it's kind of like, I don't know how to describe it, but it's like, you know, one style you might do really well against, one style might be like your kryptonite, you know, and so you can sort of, and based on different body compositions and, you know, and so on, like you can almost identify what someone's style is going to be like. And so part of it is, you know, like you might preempt a move because you're like, okay, well, they've played this style of game this whole match, and so they're probably going to go for this. But I definitely do think that there's this element of, there's something else at play.
What kind of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu fighter would I be?
You'd be quick. I feel like you'd be quite playful. There's an interesting thing that I see. I mean, I'm a playful. I find for me in my jiu-jitsu, if I get too serious, that's when I get into like, I start making mistakes. Because then it feels like a fight to me. Whereas if I'm just, and because I grew up, you know, like I've older brother, I grew up wrestling my brother, I grew up wrestling my cousins, you know, and so that feels like connection to me. And so I try to keep my jiu-jitsu really playful, and, you know, like we might have like a hard roll, but it's like we're giggling and it's like, oh, you got me kind of thing, or like, oh, I'm going to get you kind of thing. So it's very playful. So I feel like you would be quite playful.
Depends on state I'm in. I am also incredibly competitive.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that. But I think, you'd be very quick. I feel like you'd be quite nimble. Like, are you quite flexible?
I'm hyper flexible in some ways.
Yeah.
I've had to work on a lot of strength actually because I'm too flexible, but I'm not out there like impressing people with my ability to contort.
Yeah, okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
You know, sometimes I struggle to get my feet on the ground when I'm in downward facing dog.
Yeah, okay. I feel like you would be, I love this question, by the way. Women especially are we've got greater mobility than men. So I find training with women is so different to training with men, because men are kind of like, their style becomes quite broad. Like it's not nuanced. It's not like, they go wide in how they do a movement. So it's a lot of pressure and strength, and there's like, it's clear, but it's not precise. Whereas women, when you train with a woman, you can't leave them space, because you leave the slightest bit of space and like somehow they're going to manage to move their knee up and get it in the way. Whereas men, they just don't have the same mobility. They don't have there's not that same precision. And so I find women, I feel like you'd be quite technical. So you'd be, because you're a deep thinker, so you'd be very precise. Not so much of a brawler, you know. I kind of find sometimes like women can be like a bit
Brawly.
Yeah, brawly, and like just like, okay, cool, like almost, I don't want to say spazzy, but it's just like quick moving but non-precise. It's a lot happening, you know, and so it pushes the cardio and it overwhelms your opponent, because there's so much stimulus. And then there's more of like a relaxed technical kind of, and I mean I feel like you could play both. but I think you'd be more technical and precise.
I think I would start out being the scrappy, over yelling. Yeah. Really, like, I remember I have this distinct memory of myself. Speaking of, like, can we, what is the nature of being able to observe the self? I have this memory where I'm, like, looking at myself. I'm not inside myself, but I'm watching myself jump around on the netball court. And I was playing one of the defenses, like goal defense or something, and this girl that I was against was trying to shoot a goal. And instead of, like, getting back and thinking about, like, what's the physics aspect of this? Like, how am I going to time my jump to intercept the ball before she hoops it? I was in front of her, right up in her face, jumping up and down repetitively, like waving. I'm pretty sure that's, like, illegal in the game of netball. I don't know how I got away from it, but I got away with it. But I guess the referee was like, she doesn't stand a chance. I don't need to reprimand her right now. She's not going to make it. She's not going to learn anything from this moment. I was jumping up and down, up and down, up and down, and I guess, like, that was indicative of my personality as a young person, and also for a long time as a teen and into my 20s of just, like, so much energy and movement and chaos almost. But now I feel like, with a deeper connection to meditation as a practice, and also just aging and seeing the benefit creatively, at least, of slowing down.
Yeah.
I feel like I've come more into that mode of being that is a little bit more relaxed, much more technical.
Yes.
So I think if I was to, in a different timeline, have pursued Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I think I would have started out that way.
Yeah.
Like a really, really obvious, almost like, we don't even know where to start with her.
Yeah.
Kind of way. And then potentially trap relaxed into more of a playful lioness.
Yeah. It's interesting because I resonate with that. Like, I look back at, I started Muay Thai before I got into Jiu-Jitsu, and I look at, oh God, like, because I was just that, like, almost like a, like small dog syndrome, where the chihuahuas are the ones that are, like,
Yaffy.
Yeah, it's that energy. And then I've kind of, over time, been humbled and learnt that doing it that way leads to injury, or, you're just annoying, or, like the heavy guys will just pin you down and wait till you calm down. Yeah. And so, I've learnt to strategize and slow down and, like wait for the space, wait for your opponent to make a mistake, and then capitalize on it, rather than just like, if I just do the most, something will happen.
Yeah, that's almost like my relationship to conversation and interviewing is like, it used to be, how do I ask the most questions? How do I interject at every interesting turn in someone's story? How do I make sure you're, like, juicing this moment for everything it's worth? And now I prefer to sort of sit back, and if I have a thought while someone's speaking, I just trust, like, I can either come back to that thought at the end of what they've said, or there'll be a new thought, or I have a game plan.
Yeah.
On the playfulness note, I think, like, playfulness can definitely, playfulness is such a great approach to life. And I also think that there's a level of playfulness that is, there's almost this, like, mind game thing that can get into playfulness. And it's sort of the difference between when someone's flirtatious and present, and then when someone's almost like flirtatious in a controlling way. And I wonder how that the mind games part of jiu-jitsu plays out for you as a woman, or in general in the sport.
I think when I look at the athletes that I've worked with, I think it depends on the person, and like what their preference is as to how they want to play the game. Like, for me, because I know what has me at my best is when I can play, I capitalize on that, and I try to, if I'm like, I have conversations with my opponents, while we're rolling.
About what?
Just like, they're not full blown conversations, but nice. Like, if they get something on me, nice. Or like, just sort of like,
well, like, what is the nature of existence?
Yeah. We're not going to that extent, but just, like, it's almost this flavor of like, hey, like, this isn't a brawl. Like, we're just hanging out here, like, and, like, I'm on your team, even though I'm not on your team, like, I'm here to, like, yeah, like, let's dance. Let's have this dance. And that works for me because that's what has me at my best. I've worked with clients where like that's just not, it's not their preference. It doesn't feel good for them. You know, it feels forced. It would feel too off track of just who they are. You know, I mean, they could train themselves to be that way, but it's like what, how do you want this to go? Like if you could have it all your way, how would you want it to feel? And, you know, and so I've had clients where they're like, I want it to feel gritty and I want it to feel hard and I want to struggle and I want to come out of it being like, fuck yes, like I worked my ass off for that. And so it's like, okay, well then that's what you want to come at it with. You don't want to, you know, come in with this playful, flirty energy almost if what has you feel good is that, hey, I'm willing to fucking outwork you, you know? And so, yeah, it's sort of identifying like what has you at your best and how can you capitalize on that, when it comes to fighting someone.
In jiu-jitsu, are you using your mindset to manipulate your opponent?
I wouldn't say mainstream jiu-jitsu, not so much. But certainly for me, I mean, I'm big on human behavior. I like playing with, I guess, the malleability of reality, you know, and seeing how like when I shift my energetics, how does that impact someone? You know, like if I do this, how do they respond? And so for me, I definitely play in those arenas, and I do with certain clients if they're willing to play in that. But I think for the most part, it's not a thing. But, you know, for like as an example, like I remember, again, my very first jiu-jitsu competition, there was a match that I had where there was a little bit of a scramble, you know. And so when I say scramble, things happen really quickly, and it was sort of like both fighting for the dominant position, you know, and it's sort of, there's just this moment where it's like a lot is happening and where are we going to end up? And I ended up in an armbar position, which is, you know, she was still defending, so she had her hands still connected, but essentially my goal was to extend her arm, separate her hands and extend her arm for a joint lock on the elbow, which would lead to hopefully her tapping. And if she didn't, it would break her arm basically. And there was this really interesting moment where like I was like, okay, I'm in the dominant position here. I could win this. Like this is the moment where if I can just get these hands separate, I've won. And because we'd just come out of the scramble, I was still in that scramble mode. So it was like, you've got to do this, like get the hands separate, you know. And then I had this moment where I was like, hang on. And this is all inner self-talk as this, you know, match is unfolding. I went, hang on, what the fuck am I doing? Why am I scrambling? I'm in the dominant position here. Like I am one step away from tapping her out. Why am I scrambling? And so there's actually video footage. You can see I'm kind of scrambling and then I stop and I go, and I take this deep breath and it's like I slow everything right down. And it's this interesting thing because I believe that the most relaxed person in the room is the most powerful person in the room, and that whoever has the more kind of certainty around their state will pull the other person into their state. And so, you know, like if someone walks into a room and they're highly anxious, you watch the rest of the room become anxious. If there's someone who is deeply anchored in relaxation, you watch them shift the anxious person. And so in this situation, I went, why am I scrambling? And I relaxed. And it's the strangest thing because she just lets her hands go and just literally just hands me her arm. And like I watch her back and I'm like, I relaxed, you know, and that sudden state shift of me being quite scampery and, you know, anxiety led to like co-regulation is a thing. You know, and so I often, and I don't know for certain, I'd love to have a conversation with her one day, but I look at it and go, oh, did she co-regulate to my relaxation and go, you know what, have her. You know,
Well, life goes on.
Yeah. And whether it was even conscious that she, you know, whether she had that thought of like, you know what, I give up, I don't care, have it, or whether it was just a instinctual response to feeling me stop racing.
How often do you see in your own practice or in the practice of others somebody getting themselves into a position where really they should be tapping out and they don't, and then they get injured?
Often.
Yeah.
Yeah. More so with less experienced people. And I think part of that is just not knowing your threshold. You know, like I think when you've been training for long enough, you sort of know, like you might be in a choke or something, and you can sort of, you learn to feel what is, oh, I'm about to lose consciousness, and like what is, nah, I'm safe here. You know, and you can sort of feel when something's on and when there's a possibility for escape. So I think some of it is just collecting data over years of training, you know, and kind of like, I mean, I've had moments where I've been in a choke and I can, you start to get that fishbowl feeling, you know, when it's like you're not hearing clearly. It's like you've got something covering your ears, or like your peripheral vision starts to kind of close in, and that's when I know I'm like, okay, like I need to tap soon, otherwise I'm gonna have a little nap. So yeah, I think part of it is just time and experience and collecting data and getting close to getting injured but not getting injured, and sometimes getting injured and going, okay, that took it too far. But I certainly think that there's a lot of situation, and I think it's when people are coming from that provership, which when we're trying to prove ourselves, that's anxiety led. That's like, it's the undertone of needing to prove ourselves is that in order for me to be safe and fit in within the tribe, I need to claim my place. And so, you know, I do see it a lot when, you know, white belts, they don't have the belt to kind of symbolize that I know my stuff. So they prove it through action, attempt to prove it through action. And so they push that a little bit too far to try and create safety.
You're right. What's it like being choked out?
I've never had a sleep. I've never lost consciousness. I've come close. I think it depends.
Sometimes on it's enjoyable.
Well, you know what? I had a friend who, she got choked out unconscious in a comp. And God, she took it so well. Because it's quite vulnerable, right? Because there's been situations in the UFC where people have, you know, lost control of their bowels and, you know, all sorts of stuff. I mean, it doesn't happen often, but it's a possibility. You know, and of course there's those 10 seconds where you're out, you're unconscious. So like for some people, it's their body like contorts over into weird things, or they might kind of, you know, have a little just they don't have that same control of their body. But in this situation, the friend, she lost consciousness, and she took it so well. Her opponent was completely apologetic, and she said, "No, I had the best dream. Like I didn't want to wake up. Like I had the most incredible dream." And I hear that often. That, you know, like you have this. You're only out for 10 seconds or so, but you have these like incredible blissful dreams that you don't want to come back from, and you wake up and it's like a system reset. You know, and you hear these stories, and I've witnessed where, you know, someone's been choked out, they're laying on the floor and everyone's crowded around them saying their name, and they wake up and they're like, why are you all saying my name? And they don't even realize that they've passed out, you know, or like they wake up and there's that moment of they think they're in bed and they're like, why are all of you in my house? Wait, where am I? Oh, I'm at the gym, you know? So, yeah. But it is my experience of coming close is that it's just your senses just slowly start to lose sharpness, you know, and you might, even the other day training, I had a choke on one of the guys at training, and he was pretty determined not to tap out. And he said to me, he did tap in the end, and he said, yeah, my hands were going numb. You know, I was feeling like the pins and needles. And so I knew there wasn't a lot of oxygen getting through to my brain. So
it's like a mini death.
Yeah.
Controlled near-death experience.
Yeah. I think there's like, I'm going to be surprised if there's like DMT release and all sorts of stuff happening.
Yeah, well, you're changing the biochemistry of your brain when you starve it of oxygen. It's what it needs to survive. Yeah. How interesting. Maybe I'll get into Brazilian jiu-jitsu after this.
You would love it.
Look, my boyfriend wants to get back into it, and I just think I should let him have Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Yeah. I actually think that would work really well for me if he has Brazilian jiu-jitsu and I can find something else. And
yeah, touche.
Yeah, that's okay for me. I do love watching the UFC though.
Yeah,
as a secret thing. Like I really enjoy watching. I watch some stuff online, and whenever there's a big fight on, we'll pay for it so we can watch it. The most recent one that I watched actually was that silly fight between the YouTuber, what's his name?
Oh,
Jake Paul. He was fighting as like a featherweight against a weight class above, and he was doing all these really weird things, like with his facial expression in the cage, that I thought was really. Oh no, they weren't in a cage; they were in a boxing ring. That I thought was like really interesting, like poking his tongue out and almost like using his playfulness in his kind of like darting around and like, oh, I don't give the gesture, like I don't give a fuck about what happens here, as a way to almost psych his opponent out, and it was really weird. Like it was almost psychotic. You know, he'd get punched in the face. Did you watch it?
No, I don't really watch boxing, but yeah,
it was silly anyway. It was all for entertainment, but he get punched in the face, and then his reaction to getting punched into the face was to poke his tongue out and almost like jeer.
Yeah.
I think that was attacked. Like it was very much attacked that he went in there planning to do. I'm interested in the default for humans to violence. Like across history, humans have always been violent, and even in modern contexts where we have sports like Brazilian jiu-jitsu and judo and karate, and actually some of these, I'm guessing some of these martial arts are not modern at all. They're ancient, in fact. But they all have this air of violence to them because there's something in humans that needs to be expressed, and it's violence and it's aggression. Why do you think that is?
I think part of it is that inherent survival mechanism. You know, like we have to have conflict. You know, and if conflict is not, I guess, more conscious and healthy, then, it comes out as violence and like territorialism and, those sorts of things. I think as well, like, there's an interesting thing that I always see play out with martial arts where, and this is certainly true for me, when someone's come from like a chaotic upbringing or has been involved in some sort of uncontrolled violence, martial arts becomes like an outlet, and it's shifting from destructive violence to like constructive, and I do think one of the things that I see often is that if someone doesn't have a vision to build towards, they've just got all this like energy that it's got no direction, it's got nowhere to go. And so I think boredom is detrimental to the human psyche, and so we kind of, if we're not constructing something, then we start destructing something, and then that's when it turns into almost like a cure for boredom is just like, let's ruin our lives, let's destroy something. And so like I hear it's one of the most common things you hear in martial arts, where it's like jiu-jitsu saved my life or Muay Thai saved my life, and it's like the before and after of like gang affiliation and like home invasions or robberies or, whatever, to martial arts. And like now that energy it has somewhere to go, and it's inspired and it's constructive rather than desperate and, destructive.
Yeah, I've always wondered about with martial arts if it's a inherent way to teach you respect.
Yeah, definitely.
Self-respect. Yeah, and through having self-respect, you have no respect, but
that which is
outside.
I think there's an element of, even in violence, whether it's constructive in terms of martial arts or whether it's destructive in terms of, uncontrolled violence, I think there's an element of self-expression in it. We have to have that outlet, and I think that if we haven't found a healthy outlet, it's got to go somewhere. I went through a phase where I was really curious about the gladiatorial games, in the Roman Empire, and like that was, and especially when I started working with athletes, I really looked into like the way, because when you look at the gladiatorial games, they were like, it was entertainment, it was like the ancient version of almost the UFC, where their athletes or their competitors or whatever you wanted to call them, they had sponsorships, and, like people had their favorites and they would bet on them, and, and obviously in that situation it was life or death. It was, humans pitted against Mayans or, all sorts of like these bizarre dynamics. But I actually spent a lot of time looking into gladiators and how they would run these games and how the athletes would market themselves to get new weapons or those sorts of things, and how modern day athletes could actually like leverage that understanding to make their sport of choice profitable and to be able to, you know, like build a profile and like almost a brand. When you look at things like that, like violence, there's a place for it in society, and it's just I think it has to be there. I think we have to have conflict, and if it's not happening kind of like locally in these kind of structured martial arts formats, then, you know, it's got to show up elsewhere. It's, you know, I mean, we look at war when we go more macro. Yeah, it's two sides of the same coin, you know, conflict versus like connection.
Yeah.
And in martial arts, you get both. You get your conflict, but you get it through the same people that you connect with.
Have you been around uncontrolled violence in your life?
Yeah, so I mean, my early adulthood, late teens, I was associating largely with gangs and, you know, a lot of like drug violence and that sort of thing. And so I think, I don't know, I think I've always had this interesting kind of relationship to violence because of growing up the only girl and, you know, wrestling my brother and that, and, you know, feeling this, because my brother was older and bigger, and, you know, feeling this kind of sense of powerlessness in those dynamics. And so, yeah, I remember as I got older, always having an interest in maybe I should learn boxing or Muay Thai or something. But instead ended up, you know, associating with gangs and seeing a lot of like street fights break out and, different dynamics of, very, unpredictable violence.
Yeah, I mean, that's the worst, the unpredictable violence. I mean, I'm guessing that it's not easy to predict what's coming at you when you're training in jiu-jitsu or fighting in jiu-jitsu, but at least, you know, it's within the boundaries of a set of rules, like a code of conduct.
Yes.
And then, you know, when you're out on the street, there's no code of conduct.
Yeah.
Anything that changed your perception on violence and like how deep within the psyche that need is buried?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, there was a moment, I think it was about 16 or 17, where, you know, as I said, I was hanging out with a lot of pretty dangerous people, gangs and that sort of thing. And often that went hand in hand with drugs. And so there was one particular moment when I was young, where we'd gone to a friend's place. I say friend very loosely. And I mean associate. Yeah. I think he was on day 5 of, you know, a drug-induced bender. And he was always someone that there was kind of two sides to him. There were moments where he was really friendly and very loving and very protective. And then there were moments where he was just unpredictable and unsafe, and like he would make my skin crawl, you know, where it was just like he was never someone that you could track. You couldn't kind of get, it was always like, what mood's he going to be in? And so, yeah, and he wasn't, because of this, he wasn't my favorite person to associate with, but it was my boyfriend at the time's friend. And so often we would just go there, you know, to hang out as a group. And yeah, this one night as I said, we went there, and I think he was, day 5 without sleep. And he was just, you know, jumping on the couch and just like very erratic kind of gesture, childlike, unpredictable behavior. And his living situation was that he kind of, his room backed onto like a shed. And so I remember seeing him kind of like duck away for a moment and bring this chainsaw in and start to kind of, I don't know what you call it, the choke, I think, where, you know, you pull it to start the motor. And me and my friend are sitting there going, but like, what's going on? And he manages to start this chainsaw up and starts like cutting through the ceiling and just like cackling. And I remember it like it was yesterday. There was this moment that he looked at me and my friend, and I don't know, there was just this like glint in his eyes, and he cackled, and then next thing he's chasing us through the house with a chainsaw. And so yeah, we got out of there pretty quick, and that was a moment for me where up until then it had I'd seen fights break out, and I'd seen, you know, like people getting their heads stopped in gutters and stuff like that. But it was still very, I mean, it doesn't sound it, but quite mild, you know, like it was almost like high school brawls, that kind of vibe. I'd never felt like the genuine, like it was all fun and games until that. And I remember the feeling of like, as I'm running away from him, like just like my whole body wanted to like duck and like make itself so small that the risk of him catching up to me was minimized. But that was this moment where I was like, man, I can't keep living like this. I can't keep associating with people like this, because it's only going to escalate, you know? And like it was the first time where I was like, oh, I actually don't know what this guy is capable of.
Yeah.
You know?
Did you think that he was going to hurt you?
Not intentionally. Like, I really think that it was a joke, a very poor taste joke, but that it was, you know, like, just let's get a reaction. Let's scare the girls. Let's get them screaming and, you know, and almost like let's show off for the boys, you know. But the thing that, I mean, we managed to get out of the, you know, we got away from the place before he kind of caught up. But I think when I tune into like what was his intent, I think it was maybe to corner us and like playfully jab at us with a running chainsaw. But you know, when I think of how he was, and that I knew that he was 5 days into, you know, no sleep and whatever else, and we know how important sleep is to processing information and
and aim,
depth perception, agility and all of coordination, all the things. And so, you know, whilst I think it was playful, if you want to call it that, I do think like there was big risk for death, like for fatality, even if accidentally, you know,
or grievous injury.
Yeah.
I mean, that's wild. Like, I don't know anyone that's been threatened, playfully or not, with a running chainsaw.
Yeah.
Also, you just think of like a chainsaw.
Yeah.
Like, that's a violent weapon.
Yeah. Have you ever seen Scarface?
No, but I've seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah. I'm not good with gore. I hate all of that sort of stuff. And I'd started watching Scarface, and so there's a scene in Scarface. So I think it's Scarface. I'm pretty sure it's that. Maybe one of the sequels, where a guy is murdered with a chainsaw. He's tied up and he's murdered with a chainsaw. And so I've seen that before this whole dynamic played out. And so, I mean, I just have this I hate chainsaws. Like,
yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. To this day, like, I still, anything to do with chainsaws, even if I could drive past someone on the street and see them starting up a chainsaw to cut down a tree, and I'd be like, I am removing myself from this vicinity.
I mean, that makes total sense. I don't know if there's a hypnotherapy for that. Get over yours.
There would be.
Yeah, but it's just there's something particularly violent about that, you know. It's particularly gnarly.
Yeah.
I can't put my finger on it, but it gives a different turn of the gut than there's someone telling you I was held at gunpoint.
Yeah.
Or even I was held at knife point. Like there's something about the chainsaw that's like inherently destructive and violent and gory.
I think I needed that though. Like, because I mean, at that, when I look back, I was on a slippery slope and I didn't realize it. And you know, and it was the kind of thing, it was sneaking up on me, you know. And so I think I needed something that was like ghastly enough where it was like, these people aren't my friends. Like, they're not, I mean, they were my friends, but like, they don't really care about me, or they don't, more to the point, they don't have the capacity to care about me. Like, they're so in their own flavor of survival that how a healthy person would interact and show care and show protection of a loved one, like, that just wasn't available to them. And so that, it was this wake up call. And that, like, I mean, that was largely, it wasn't the end of me associating with gangs and drugs, but it was a big pivot point. And I put a lot of boundaries in place because of that situation. And so when I look back, I'm like, thank God, because I don't know where I would have ended up had I not been shaken awake. Yeah.
Maybe perhaps the chainsaw is a gift in that way. I think there's something interesting about the amount of violence we consume on the subject of controlled and unhinged violence is that even for those of us that are enacting unhinged violence, and perhaps we have a structured aggression practice, when we still see so much violence, like when the Bondi massacre happened recently, which was terrifying and dreadful. It was all over the internet within minutes, and you're seeing images of two men firing bolt action rifles into a crowd of people, and it's not some Scorsese directed blockbuster. I don't think it is good for us to be consuming that much violence because we have enough within us to reckon with. I recently had a really powerful experience with psychedelics, and I got this sense that a lot of what I was processing during this experience was the amount of violence that I have absorbed through watching really gory things online. And I'm not someone, I haven't had the experiences that you've had, but I do have a morbid curiosity about life, and I do tend to want graphic descriptions of things, and I do also, like I had previously, a real love for horror and gore and movies that would depict violent scenes in graphic detail, because I really wanted to get a sense of what was going on. And I just really stopped. Like I've really stopped seeking that out. The other day my boyfriend and I went and saw the new Timothée Chalamet film with he's a table tennis player, and it has elements of violence in it, and I didn't know that. And had I have known that, I would have said, I don't want to see this film. And it was fine. I felt like it was fine, like I didn't realize this was here. I haven't sorted it out, but here it is. There's a little bit of blood and guts happening. Okay. But the seeking out of that and to try and get in touch with the violence that's within me, I've just realized is so dysfunctional. And I spent this significant period of a recent deep psychedelic journey purging this violence, because it was on some level controlling my behavior. And I'm controlling my behavior in really insidious ways, like not obvious ways. Like not like playing video games and then going out and wanting to do what you do on like steal cars and shoot guns, but like this agitation within my system that I wasn't able to reach to detox from my system. But it like certainly, my system certainly purged it. Intuitively, I feel, that was the case. And I just like, I don't know how we move forward as a society now that we're also connected, and that we have so much access to footage of everyday life and their life being violent. I'm not sure what to do about that. Yeah. What would your thoughts or advice be on that?
Like I talk in my work a lot about capacity, and like your ability to stay present through something, through a particular stimulus, is some of it is familiarity. And so there's kind of this, what comes up in me is this interesting paradox, because I don't have a lot of capacity for gore. I remember there was that situation where there was a tourist that was stabbed in the neck on, I think she's in the US, by a guy. I think he was going through a bit of mental instability. Yeah, and psychosis. Yeah, and stabbed this woman in the neck, and it was on film, and it circulated the internet. And I remember I came across the video unexpectedly just on someone's Instagram story. And so I watch in me, like I have a inherent avoidance to gore. Like if there's a even a film with a little bit of gore, I'm the ones, I'm hiding, or I'm like immediately pausing. If I'm watching it on Netflix or something, I'm pausing it and I'm like, nah, like skip it. So there is an avoidance in me, which on one hand I would say it's healthy, but on the other hand it's like it's avoided. And like if you're avoidant of something, eventually you run into it, and so there's an interesting relationship there for me. And so it's almost, when I think of someone like yourself, where you've dug into it because it's of curiosity, it's almost, I feel like on one hand it's going to sound morbid, but it's like you're building your capacity to actually be with it and kind of alchemize it, because it's not something you're shying away from. Like you're understanding it. You're taking the time to kind of dig through it. But I do think there is that element of, you know, when I think of like the movie Saw and all of that, you know, and they're like
gratuitous.
yeah, and there's such a, I don't quite know how to put it into words, but there's such a, I mean, it's so psychological, you know, like the storyline of those movies is that it's someone from what I've seen, I haven't watched all of them, so I don't know the entire storyline, but from what I've grasped of it, it's that, you know, they're games.
Yeah, like you mean watched, you're kidnapped and then put in a game-like scenario. Yeah, it's like that same other side of the coin of playfulness, manipulation.
Yes. And so I think there's an energetic to that, which is like, it's very dark because it was, I mean, and so if we're watching that, we're taking that on of like the violence is a game.
I mean, we were pointing to that before when you were talking about the guy with a chainsaw.
Yeah.
Is that he's acting like a kid.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even jiu-jitsu, I mean, it's violence and it's a game. You know, I was speaking about my competition experience of, you know, like I'm playing with my food. I'm the lioness playing with my food. So I think it's, I mean, I don't really have an answer to your question, but it's on one hand, I think my avoidance of it is not healthy, but I also have found another outlet.
And a spirit.
Yeah. And I play in it in ways. And I wouldn't say necessarily that you're over, for lack of a better way of putting it, kind of like, digging into it and seeking it out. I wouldn't say that's healthy either, but I also don't think it's unhealthy.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's how present you are with it. Like, you talk about capacity building. During the Bondi shooting, I was actually I was in Bondi, not near the beach. I was in Surrey Randwick, which is an adjacent suburb. And we were having dinner, and then all of a sudden, everyone's phone started lighting up. And my cousin and her partner and my brother were all getting these messages from their community because they live there. And, or, you know, next minute we're on Facebook or we're in Instagram where stuff's being shared, and there was that footage of the gunman shooting from the footbridge. And it was on a reel, and we know that reels are designed to play over and over until you swipe. And I just I got lost in it. It was crazy. Like it was just like bang, bang. Reel plays again, bang, bang. Reel plays again, bang. And I was lost. I was not being present until my cousin. Until my cousin who, and I regret this, she's pregnant. She was just like, no, can we just not do sound? And then that pulled me out of it, and I was like, what am I doing? Like, why? What happened for me to be there, just almost like allowing that energetically to penetrate my field without being there myself to make sense of it, you know? And so I think because there's been so many experiences like that for me in watching films where I probably have got into a film wanting to experience my feelings through watching gratuitous gore, and then it's gotten to a point where I have disassociated, but that's still been, my brain still processed that, and then it's put it somewhere in a subconscious box. Yeah. And from that subconscious box, almost like, you know, again, what you talk about with Brazilian jiu-jitsu is learn your capacity, learn your boundaries, and you get that through playing the game for long enough. You learn, okay, my vision's closing in, my hands are going numb, I need to tap out because I'm about to pass out. It's the same with my consumption of violence is I know that I can now watch a movie, and if I don't know that there's going to be gunshots in it, and there is, I can stay present with it and go, it's not my choice, but it just happened. Now I didn't know. But I'm not dissociating. Yeah. And I'm just lucky that psychedelics work on that level for me really well. Yeah. It's crazy, and we're you know, we're only becoming more and more accessible. You know, there's more and more applications that are popping up and needing our attention. Yeah. To divert and split across things that normally a human wouldn't have to metabolize and absorb and see every day.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because it's like so much of the world we're seeing it speed up at the moment. And I kind of put that like violence and like real violence being readily available. Like you just search it.
www.violence.com.
Yeah. Or like, you know, in my case with seeing that stabbing, it just popped up, you know, like it's just there in my world, you know. And so I think we're going through this interesting phase of humans very rapidly rewiring the way we relate to stimulus. I don't believe that you can necessarily have a negative without also having a positive. I think the two go, again, two sides of the same coin. Yeah, it's things are just shifting and changing. The kaleidoscope is moving. But I do think it's going to be really interesting to see where humans end up as things keep, because they're only speeding up.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think the other side of that coin, at least from my perspective, is the presence piece. Like, you have to be present.
Yeah.
You have to be present. You have to be present as a parent. You have to be present as an entrepreneur. You have to be present on your phone. You have to be present while you eat. Like,
yes,
we're not in a place where we can skip presence. It's required.
And I think it's so interesting that we do have the world speeding up, but on the other hand, nervous system work is more predominant than ever.
Yeah.
So it's like, as one is taking off, like, so is the other.
Yeah.
Which is curious.
Yeah, that's what happens to balance the world out. I was trying to articulate a similar tension that I was exploring on a previous podcast with the world of peptides, which is, I think, a really interesting thing and a conversation for a later date. But we're seeing this rise in like this a subculture of wellness that is anti-aging, but it's a new kind of like innovative, almost like genetically driven anti-aging beyond like, even the like Botox and stuff like that. Like, it's going a step beyond that. Like, you're trying to reprogram yourself at a cellular level to anti-age. And at the same time, we're living in a world that is increasingly productivity focused. People are working harder. They're working longer hours, sitting against a screen, consuming more blue light. And it's incredibly aging. And so in order to balance that out, because people are like, well, I don't want to stop with the productivity, which is aging me. I want to be able to do the productivity. I want to be able to achieve the things and get whatever feeling of satisfaction I think I'm going to get from being productive. But I don't want it to shove in my face.
Yes.
And so, yeah, the world just has this interesting way of reflecting back to us how we're trying to balance things out for better or for worse. And because I do think there's potential with peptides. That's some really great potential, I heard the other day in a podcast, if you can make it to 90, you can make it to 300.
Oof.
I don't know how you feel about that. It's like it's a divisive topic at the moment, that level of anti-aging. But who knows? Maybe that means that the end of life is less grueling and tragic than it has been. So I don't know what that means, but it's just, the balance is always trying to be struck, and we're getting a reflection of that through the way in which we're so connected to everything that's happening in the world.
Yeah.
Final piece of advice from you on nervous system overload from people that do feel like they're constantly consuming, and what would you say is one small step in the right direction of having at least one foot in the safety realm, safety zone?
I would say track your patterns. I think we can't intervene in a world we cannot see. So most people, like, we're shifting from survival state to safety state. If safety state is even accessible for a lot of people, they've got no familiarity to safety. But it's all unconscious. It's just this ride that they're strapped into. And so it's kind of bringing presence to it. It's bringing awareness to it and tracking, like, what has me go into anxiety? What has me going to shut down? What has me feel better? Like, is I get up and I have a cold shower. Like, that gives me a little pep in my step. And that could be a tool for the toolkit. So I think just kind of bringing awareness to the patterns, because when you can notice a pattern, you know how to interrupt the pattern, and to interrupt a pattern, all we have to do is one micro tweak and do things a little bit differently. It would be just start to track what has you at your worst, what has you at your best, what has you maintaining, and then just play around with it a little bit. Play around with different internal, resources, external resources, and get to kind of know yourself, get to know what moves you.
Where can people find you on your work?
Brianna Bowley. That's how they search my name. I'll pop up on Instagram, Facebook, Spotify, YouTube. I'm across all the platforms.
Cool. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you.